Wounded but Not Broken, with host Patrick Scroggins. As a U.S. Army attack helicopter pilot deployed in Iraq, Patrick faced a devastating crash, which resulted in him dying, losing a leg, and a slew of broken bones. Patrick's story of rehabilitation has helped others to overcome their own obstacles. Each week, Patrick recounts stories of inspiration and interviews guests who have overcome remarkable obstacles. This is Wounded but Not Broken, with your host, Patrick Scroggins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wounded but Not Broken on yet another Monday night. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Tonight we have a very distinguished guest on, a very highly decorated service member on. But before we get to him and before I introduce him, we had a tragedy in the BBN family. And I would just like to ask everybody to keep the Eli family in their prayers, going through a tough time right now, and they could use the prayers. And, you know, I know us in the family here, we're going to be standing beside them and doing whatever they need us to do. But if everybody would just please keep the Eli family in your prayers. So on tonight's show, we got James Furlong, Sergeant James Furlong. And I don't want to take away from his story, but he's a very highly decorated, very courageous soldier from the Vietnam era. And so, Mr. Furlong.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing just great. By the way, one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is that despite some successes and things that I've accomplished, I'm still just Jim.
Okay. All right. Jim. So I understand in Vietnam War, you were in the 2nd Battalion, 25th Infantry Division, right? So you were drafted, I think you told me, correct?
That is correct. I was drafted. I was with Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry Division, 14th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division. Tropic Lightning.
Okay. Gotcha. I was there once in my career.
Okay.
So you, when you got drafted, you went in, you went to basic training, I'm assuming, and you became, what was your job in the military?
Yeah, I was drafted in June of 1967. And went to first Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training, and then infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And at that point, I was kind of singled out to go to another school. We were losing NCO type of cadre very quickly in Vietnam. So I was sent to a camp, and I was promoted. Eventually, when I completed the course, I was promoted to sergeant. So I went over as a squad leader.
Okay, so you kind of fast-tracked from the beginning then.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
They waived all the rules of how long you had to be a private and to get people trained and get them out to help in Vietnam.
Right. Yeah, because I'm assuming at that point, I mean, you know, the casualties were pretty high. I mean,
yeah, 68 was the first year, and that's the year I went over there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my next question. So what year did you get to Vietnam?
Yeah, I got there in May of 68 after Tet, but we were still mopping up at times. There were times that we were in Cholan, which is the Chinese section of Saigon, and, you know, we were mopping up there. And then we were really, our area of operation was from the Cambodian border to Saigon, and then kind of north of Saigon. But you know, the thing about the Canadian border there, it's an area called the Parrots Peak. And the Parrots Peak gets to be within about 40 to 45 miles from Saigon. So this was prime territory for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You know, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese would come down, and when they crossed over the Cambodian border into South Vietnam, they were only 40 miles or so from Saigon.
Gotcha. So how old were you when you got to Vietnam?
I turned 21 in Vietnam, and my 21st birthday, there's a picture of me walking with my rifle in the air, crossing a fairly deep stream. It was about up to my armpits. So
I'm sure, you know, being drafted, I mean, you know, it's one thing to sign your name on the dotted line because you're volunteering, but being drafted, you know, how did that affect you? How was your attitude, you know, going over there?
My attitude was very good. I mean, there was never any consideration to be a draft dodger or anything like that. My father was a World War II vet. I was very proud of him. And so, my attitude was very good going in. And, there might have been, if I hadn't gotten hurt, because, medically I wasn't able to serve anymore. If I hadn't gotten hurt, they probably would have, I might have stayed in.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll get to all that in a minute. But so, I was just curious because, you hear stories about, guys get drafted and they go over there and they got bad attitudes. And, I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you're there. So, I can say one thing. But I'm just trying to paint a picture for, there's so many people in this country nowadays especially that just take everything for granted. Stuff's not good enough, or they want to gripe and bitch and whine about certain things that really, in the grand scheme of things, just aren't that big of a deal. And so that's why these stories are so important to me. I like these stories to getting told because hopefully, someone younger is listening and they're like, dang, I don't have it so bad. And, there's so much that can be learned from our service members, especially the ones that have fought in war. Our younger generation, I think, can learn a lot and benefit a lot from it. So that's why that's my big motivation in these stories. And so, if you wanted to start in your Vietnam, your experience, at first, what you thought, how you felt, and even how when you came home, just go through the whole thing if you want to.
Sure. I actually left the United States through Fort Lewis, Washington, and McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma. And my first impression of Vietnam was, darn, it's hot. When they opened up that airplane door, it was like a blast furnace. And yet it was nighttime because we could see, we landed at Cam Ranh Bay, and we can see firefights going on in the foothills surrounding Cam Ranh Bay. They were almost like evacuating the airplane. It was like, get off, get off, get off. And we got off, and before we got to the building where we were going to process, that big old DC-8 turned around and gunned the engines and took off down the runway. They didn't stay on the ground any longer than they had to. And a funny thing, you get 30 days of leave before you go to Vietnam. And so I had because I was at Fort Benning, I was able to have my personal vehicle down there. So my car was a 66 GTO. I was a hot rodder when I was a kid. Anyway, I drove 3 other guys home. So there were 4 people in the car. There were 4 Purple Hearts in my car. There were 2 Distinguished Service Crosses in my car. There were 2 killed in action in my car. And there was a Silver Star and a Bronze Star for Valor in my car. That was quite a car and everything. I drove one home to Mattoon, Illinois, and I'm going to mention his name. Maybe he's got family that's going to hear this and feel good about it. His name was Alan Simpson, okay, and he was from Mattoon, Illinois. The other guy was, it was Alan Guy, Michael Simpson, Robert Schwengendorf, who ended up coming back to the United States with, thankfully, like me, only not missing a leg or anything like that. But he came back to the United States and became principal at Hammond High School here in Indiana. So Bob and I, we touch base every once in a while. But, Mike Simpson and I ended up going to the same battalion, the 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry Regiment. We walked into the company headquarters together, the regimental headquarters together. The top sergeant greeted us, took our personal documents. He looked at Mike and said, you're going to Delta Company. And he looked at me and said, you're going to Bravo Company, 2nd of the 14th. And that was a whisker away from being in the same situation that Mike Simpson was in. And he died. He's the other Distinguished Service Cross that was in my car. So that was a little bit of fate intervening right at that point. And I was going to also mention to you, when it came to my squad, the people I led, and my company, as a matter of fact, for the most part, there were a few people that had bad attitudes. But for the most part, when you were out on patrol, there was an unwritten rule. Somebody had your 6, and I had somebody else's 6. We always covered each other's backs. We put our game faces on, we put our gripes away, and we did our job out there, okay? So that was what we did. Same thing with race relations. I mean, there were times where, some of the African Americans stayed with their groups, and some of the Latinos stayed with their groups, and the white guys stayed with their groups. But for the most part, when we were out in the field, we were one unit. We were a good, functioning unit. I was never worried that somebody wouldn't cover me if I needed to be covered. And I returned that favor. There were times I've crawled out under fire and dragged the guy who got, our point man, and dragged him back behind the rice paddy dikes and, got him attention, got him wounded. He was wounded, and he got his medical attention that he needed.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point that, when you're in a life or death situation, you have to be able to rely on that man or woman to your left or to the right, and that's just an unwritten rule. I mean, you don't have time for all the bullshit. It's down to business, and everybody wants to go home. Everybody has the same end goal. Everybody wants to go home, and so that's a good to point that out.
Yeah. A lot of the guys I served with we have a platoon reunion every 2 years, okay? And we get together near somebody's home, and when you walk in there, it's hard to describe the brotherhood you feel when these people are the people you trusted your life to, okay? It's hard to relate to that for a lot of people that have never been in that situation. It's hard to relate, but when we walk into that reunion, we pick up talking like we just talked the day before. We know everything about them, and we know their families and their kids and things like that. We're a tight unit still to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not a friendship that's forged like one that's of two people that have been to combat together, that have been in life or death situations together. It's just. You can't understand it. I can't make you understand it. It's just their family. They're just extended family. They're your brothers or your sisters, and you could go 20 years without seeing them, and as soon as you see them, it's just like you never went that 20 years. It's something special, and that's honestly for me, that's what I miss the most is the men and women that I fought with. So. Once you got into Vietnam and you got off that airplane, how quick before they started throwing you on patrols?
Oh, I went on patrol the first day I got in the camp.
That's always nice.
The first day I got to the 2nd Battalion Fort. It took about 24 hours to process us at what they call the replacement squadron at Cameron Bay. And then we were put on one of the smaller short takeoff and landing aircrafts. I forget what it was. It was C code, obviously, but they flew us into Cu Chi, which is where we were headquartered, our battalion, and we ended up, going out to our company that night. I mean, when the top sergeant looked at Mike Simpson and me and said, D company for you, B company for you, the next words out of his mouth were, Mike, you get on that truck, and Jim, you get on that truck. They're going out to your camp.
So do you remember the emotions that you were feeling at that point?
Yeah, on the truck I was a little scared because they were, you could see all the potholes where they had planted mines and everything like that that had blown up other trucks, And I know in Iraq and Afghanistan they had the IEDs. This was a minor form of an IED, but it would certainly kill you if it hit the truck in the right direction, So, yeah, we went out there, and, some of my other impressions, I almost immediately went on patrol, okay? In fact, I was on patrol, one of my first nights in Vietnam, I was on patrol, and we went out about, 5 to 10 kilometers at night, set up a fire support, and before I left, I would sit down with the executive officer, and we'd go over what we call pre-planned artillery fire, both for the site I was going to be at and along my travel route. So if we got attacked or ambushed or something like that, we had artillery fire, and we can just say, fire for effect on, on position number 4, something like that. So we get set up, and I had a good friend, Jim Hancock, who was a gunner on my machine gun. So they get set up. I got my machine gun set up, and I'm in a tight little perimeter and everything, because the squad's only about 10 guys, and sometimes it wasn't even 10. So we're sitting out there, and Hancock comes crawling up to me, and he goes, "Hey, Sarge," he says, "there's Charlie coming out." I says, "Well, how many?" Because I have to call in a situation report, a sit rep. He says, "Oh, I think it's just like a platoon or something like that, you know." I said, "Oh, okay. You know, I mean, I can pop an ambush. I've got the guys." So I call in my sit rep to my company, and I'm no sooner getting done with that, and it was only a few seconds, and my assistant gunner, Jerry Ware, comes up to me, and he goes, "You know, Sarge," he said, "it's at least a platoon, maybe even a company." I went, I've got the element of surprise. You know, we might be able to successfully do this, especially with the pre-planned artillery fire. So here goes crawling back to the machine gun, and it's only about 10 feet away, 20 feet away. But you can't yell it, you know, because you're in an ambush situation. So anyway, the next guy that shows up is Philip Rivers. That's the football player. Bob Rivers. Sorry about that. Bob Rivers comes up, and Bob is a hardened 10, 11 months in country. And he's got sweat pouring down his face, and he goes, "Sarge," he said, "it's at least a battalion, possibly a regiment." And he says, "I suggest we get out of here." And he didn't take much convincing. At that point, I knew that even with the element of surprise wasn't, you know, going to be. So we got up, and I started calling in the pre-planned artillery fire. Somebody went out there the next day on a routine patrol and found evidence of blood, but the bodies had all been cleaned up by that time. And I hope that's not too gross for somebody, but that's the way it was in war.
No, yeah, I mean, you know, that's the thing. This people listen to this show, you know, it's accounting stories of war, and so, you know, sometimes, you know, that paints a very disturbing picture. But you know, I'm very adamant on the stories need to be told. I think people need to understand what our men and women go through when they leave this country to go fight for our interests. You know,
I do.
But with that being said, we're going to break here. Word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back, and we'll pick up where we left off.
All right, you got it.
Put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
My father was the best truck driver I've ever known in my life. Like a family tradition.
I'm a truck driver myself. I drove around the state with my cat.
To be the truck driver, you not just only see where you go, you see the world in the larger perspective.
This is a really good time to be in the trucking industry. The dispatchers get good loads for them. The equipment is very new, and then it's very reliable.
At GTS Transportation, we make dreams come true by employing truck drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and many other occupations. Consider joining our rapidly expanding team where we put quality, human dignity, and respect back into the workforce. Contact us by visiting our website at gtscarrier.com or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
Attention, all U.S. veterans. You have served this country with honor and pride. So why is it so difficult to receive the benefits you deserve? Filing a VA claim is complicated, it's cumbersome, and time-consuming. Many veterans have a problem identifying what conditions they should apply for. VDAC, Veterans Disability Application Caddy, is an online application that greatly assists you with filling out your application and identifying the disabilities that you're entitled to. The VDAC process takes about 15 to 30 minutes. from start to finish. The entire process is simple and easy to use. The software automatically cross-references the VA database to determine what presumptive conditions you are entitled to, as well as any secondary conditions. Once done, a fully completed VA form is generated with supporting material. To find out more, go to nifv.org and click on the VDAC button. Again, the website is nifv.org and click on VDAC.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Here with Jim Furlong. Mr. Furlong, you just told that story about calling pre-planned artillery, and the next day a patrol went out and found some blood and all that. Was that your first engagement in Vietnam, or had you been in
pretty sure it was.
prior to that?
Yeah, pretty sure it was.
Okay. And then from there,
you'd be out patrol and you'd hear a twig snap, and you didn't know it was one of your guys or somebody else, and maybe you'd fire into a tree line or something. But not to mind. We hardly ever saw our enemy in Vietnam. Hardly ever. In fact, probably the first time I saw him was when he threw the hand grenade that cost me my leg.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and you want to talk about that?
Okay. We came back from a routine patrol one day, and this was January 2nd, 1969. I got hurt on January 3rd, 1969. And, I'm closing my eyes here right now trying to remember, because to me it's still vivid in my mind, okay? Everything that occurred that day, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went, I got put out in the emergency room. And so I was told when I came back from a routine patrol to go report to the CP, the command post. So I walked over there. It was unusual for me to go to a meeting of the command post, because that was usually the duty of my platoon sergeant and our company commander, and we were planning the next day's events. If a whole company or a whole battalion was moving, that, we'd all worked that out at the command post. So I got there, and I was told that my platoon was going to be the kind of like patrol, keeping an eye on the company commander and his people. Now, you got to remember, there's a company commander, a forward artillery observer who's an officer, a forward artillery observer's radio, a company radio, a battalion radio, and a company medic that travels in the command unit, okay? So they get on the chopper first, and then, I got to go back and say, I was told we were going to go on an eagle flight. Now, let me explain what an eagle flight is. An eagle flight, you usually have 10 landing zones you want to go to, but hardly do we ever get to 10. But anyway, you would go into the first landing zone, for instance. You would get off. The choppers would take off. They weren't going to sit there and be sitting ducks. They would take off, make a big circle in the sky, and we'd sweep out to a hedgerow or something like that. And then if we didn't make contact, the company radio would start chattering, and all the platoons were reporting in no contact, no contact. We would go back to the LZ that we just got let off on. The choppers would come back in, pick us up, and we dead reckon to another LZ. So it's kind of like looking for a fight. You get that, Patrick? It's
absolutely.
Kind of like walking through a minefield, trying to step on every inch of the dirt. Yeah. So about the third LZ that day, we're coming in, and we're in a chopper, and as the squad leader, I always sat with my feet out the door, which was kind of neat, because being a pilot, I know that centrifugal force. Sometimes they make that big steep turn. I'd be looking straight down at the ground, and yet I'm still safely in the airplane because of centrifugal force. So anyway, we're coming into the third LZ, and all of a sudden, my feet are out the door on the skids. And all of a sudden, the machine gunner next to me, the door gunner, whips the machine gun around and starts firing into a hedgerow. Lots of noise at that point with the gun and the stuff like that. But the gunner looks over at me, and he said hot, but I never heard it, but I could read his lips, and I knew it wasn't good. In fact, I could see some of the fire coming out of the hedgerow that we were landing towards. So we land. But again, the command chopper's in front of us. I'm right behind them, and then there's a whole bunch of other choppers behind us. And I see the company commander take off for a hedgerow, okay? He goes over a rice paddy dike, and, of course, the usual chaos breaks out when you're in a firefight. I'm supposed to be with him. I'm getting my guys as quick as I can assembled, and we start to go, and there's choppers. They would only hover a few feet off the ground. I don't know whether it's ground effect or what, but they would only hover a few feet off the ground, so I had to wait for one chopper to go by before I could catch up with the company commander. As soon as I went up on that rice paddy dike, I looked down, and the company commander is down. And there's 3 radios around him. There's the medic, and then there's the Fort Artillery observer and everything like that. So there's 6 guys standing around a guy. I'm sure he's got antennas. It's got to be obvious to the enemy he's a command-level officer. So I immediately have got to try and secure the area, and I grab a guy by the name of Junior Hudson by the collar, and I'm physically moving Junior, that was no small feat. Junior was a big, solid guy who used to box professionally. I'm pushing Junior to where I want him to go to protect the company commander and the other people. All of a sudden, I get about 5 feet from the hedgerow, and Charlie steps out, and he's got a hand grenade. And it's like he's doing an underhanded toss because he wants to get the guys behind me. He doesn't want me. I'm nothing. He wants the guys behind me. Okay? So I jumped up as high as I could, and I wish I'd been 6 feet tall because I was only 5'11" and a half. The grenade hit my fingertips. I was going to make them eat it. It hit my fingertips, fell at my feet, and it's reflex. You don't really get a chance. It's all training. It's all reflex. I just reached over and put my foot on top of it. And the explosion went off, knocked me on my back. I remember looking up and seeing a bone sticking out where my foot used to be. And by that time, the first guy to me was my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Benny Marin. Benny gets over there first, checks that I'm okay because I'm indicating to him he's still there. Charlie's still there, And he goes over, and quite honestly, I heard an M16 fire off, and then he came back and said it's okay. By that time, the medics had gotten there, and they were talking to me. They wanted me to stay conscious because they were afraid I'd go into shock, okay? And right. I did stay conscious. I was conscious until they put me out about an hour and a half later to do the surgery, which is another story, by the way, that I'll get to in a second. So anyway, I'm in pain. I mean, it hurts. I've talked a lot to schools and groups and people like that, and a lot of people have asked me why I didn't bleed out, and I've often wondered that myself. And what happened is the heat of the explosion cauterized my veins. Okay, if you can imagine that. That's how hot it is in that second that thing goes off. So anyway, they get me on a chair. Oh, and then because my company commander is hurt, and one other guy got hurt. In fact, that's the guy who died, Glenn McAdoo. He was one of the radio men around the company commander. We get the battalion commander is circling around overhead in his command chopper, and he comes down to pick up the wounded. So we didn't even have to wait for medevac. He came down, got off his chopper. They loaded me, Captain. I know the name. Something you get a little older, you start names aren't on the tip of your tongue anymore. And McAdoo, and I remember the medics stayed with us because they were trying to keep McAdoo alive. I could tell that he was the most seriously wounded guy. So the helicopter pilot, who's used to driving a lieutenant colonel around, turns around and sees 3 wounded guys, one guy with a bone sticking out where his leg should be, and he reaches over and he throws up out over to the edge of the helicopter. But he had us in the hospital within 20 minutes after getting hurt. It was about 1:20 in the afternoon, and I was in the hospital. Now, I told you it took an hour for me to get into surgery. So I'm waiting, and they've got a tourniquet on my leg, and every once in a while it would loosen. They let some of the circulation go and then retighten. And the battalion surgeon heard what had happened, and he was already in the emergency room at the 25th Evac Hospital, or 12th Evac Hospital in Cu Chi. And so I said to them, what's taking so long? You know, I've been triaged, and now I'm just sitting there. They cut my clothes off, by the way. I'm no longer as modest as I used to be because I'm sitting there. They got like a piece of paper over, but they got the fans going like mad trying to keep the place cold, or cool.
Right.
So he said there was an explosion in the Cu Chi mess hall today. It's detailed in a book called The Tunnels of Cu Chi. And what happens is in a mess hall, they try and tell you about separation. We practiced social distancing in Vietnam before anyone else in the United States did, okay? We would be out on patrol, and you weren't supposed to bunch up, okay? In case there's an ambush, then 20 guys don't get killed by one spray of machine gun bullets.
Right.
So he said, there was an explosion at the mess hall, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Well, apparently, Cu Chi was built over a tunnel complex. And Charlie got into the mess hall one night, and they have these metal trays that we used to get our food served in, and they're stacked on this tray holder, I guess you'd call it, and it's spring-loaded, so the trays are always about waist high as you come to pick them up. So it starts going up as the springs are releasing, and it's going up, and then one guy takes the tray off, and that was the tray that popped the grenade that Charlie had planted underneath the tray holder. And, of course, in the chow line, you're not thinking you're going to get hurt, and so everybody was for want of a better term, butt to butt at that time, and about 30 guys got hurt, and that meant to me that some of them were in worse shape than I was, So the grenade went off, and the metal trays provide a beautiful amount of shrapnel for everybody. But in the book Tunnels of Cu Chi, it lists the date as January 8, 1969. And I'm sure somebody misread the 3 for an 8. It was January 3rd. I'm very, very, very positive of it.
Oh, I'll have to check that book out. And so what we're going to do right now, Jim, is we're going to take another break and get a word from our sponsors, and we'll pick up right there where we left off with you going into surgery.
You got it.
Put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, right on down the line. Come on over. Come on.
Attention, looking for semi-drivers nationwide. GTS Transportation of Burr Ridge, Illinois is looking to hire or partner with experienced CDL holders in every state. If you are going to drive, why not drive for the best? Whether you are driving solo, as a team, or as an owner-operator, GTS is looking to add you to their rapidly growing company. Become part of one of the most respected, driver-friendly, and successful transportation companies in America, where drivers are treated as royalty. Contact us at gtscarrier.com. Again, gtscarrier.com. Or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667. We would love to help you, which in turn helps everyone. GTS is an equal opportunity employer.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
VDAC, an online application that helps veterans research and file for their VA disabilities, empowering the veteran to take full control of your claim. Find out more by going to our website, nifv.org, and clicking on the VDAC button. Once again, our website is nifv.org, and click on VDAC. VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggin. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
All right, everybody, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, you'll have to go back and listen from the beginning from this amazing story. But Jim, so the mess hall was attacked, over 30 wounded guys, and so all these guys came to the same cash hospital, I'm assuming.
Right. And like I say, they triage, so not everyone, I didn't have 30 guys in front of me. There were some guys behind me from the mess hall. But the more serious, there were some people obviously more seriously wounded than I was.
Right. And so that comes in with the hour and a half before you went into surgery. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That accounts for that time. You know, the last thing I remember was being in the ER finally, and them slipping the mask over me that would put me to sleep for surgery and everything. And then I woke up the next day, and it was the rest of my life.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming, so you lost your leg below the knee, correct?
That's correct, and it was traumatic. I mean, there was no hope in my heart when I went into surgery that they were going to be able to save it. It was gone.
Yeah.
In fact, I
feel you.
recently talked to one of the vets at the reunion, and he said they threw my boot in the chopper just in case. I don't remember that, but I'm sure that Denny York was definitely telling me the truth when he told me that happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of the same happened to me. I mean, mine was gone. I was cut off, clean just above my boot, And so, I mean, I saw my calf sticking out of it. But so for you, you wake up, you're missing your leg below the knee. I mean, walk me through them emotions.
The object was to try and get me back to the United States as soon as possible. And so, I was only in the 12th Evac Hospital for 2 days before I was put on a flight into the Consonute Airport in Saigon, where I also spent a night in the hotel. And by the way, remember now, I told you I got hurt on January 3rd, 1969. The Rose Bowl had been played on January 1st, 1969, and it was Ohio State against USC. And on January 5th, I watched a copy, the recorded copy of the Rose Bowl given by Coach Woody Hayes. He had come to Vietnam to show to all the troops and everything like that. So I was very, very pleased at that point that he thought so much about us that he did that. And so now I get on the big gold C-141 with a red cross on its tail. The 141's the one with the droopy wings and everything like that. But so we take off, and we're in the air for a couple of hours. But we're told it's going to be several hours to. I'm being moved to the Ryukyu Islands, which is like where Iwo Jima and all those islands were. It's part of Japan. I'm sorry, it was like Okinawa. But anyway, we're on our way to a U.S. Army hospital in Vietnam, and I'm sorry, outside of Vietnam. And the plane starts going down after only a couple hours. It starts lowering, and you can hear them pull back on the throttles and everything like that. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, that's kind of funny. I thought we were going to have a 5-hour flight, and it's only 2 hours into it. And the nurse comes on and said, we're going to buckle up and things like that, and we're making a landing in Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines because, lo and behold, there's a patient on board that's starting to run a fever, and they want to get him off the plane and into surgery as soon as possible. So imagine my surprise when we land. The door opens up at Clark Air Force Base, and they come in and they remove my litter from the what do you call it? I was the guy running the fever. They wanted to get in there and do some more debreeding. They figured that that's what the problem was. Okay, so I spent a couple days in the Ryukyu Islands. Now, my folks are back home, and they get the telegram, and the telegram says that your son was wounded. They described the injuries, and of course it's very medical. He received a traumatic amputation of left leg below the knee, and he also received a traumatic amputation of the thumb before the first distal. And I thought to myself, so they think my thumb's gone, when in actuality, I lost about 1/8 of an inch of my thumb. You can see the stitches today where they had been, So anyway, I'm laying there, and my parents are back in the Chicago area. They lived in Chicago, and they decide that they're going to call me in the Ryukyu Islands. So my dad gets on with the long distance operator after a few minutes. You know, it isn't as easy as today calling long distance.
Right.
They get to the hospital, and of course they get the guy on duty, and they say they'd like to talk to James Furlong. So this guy's going through his records. Meanwhile, I'm back at Clark Air Force Base, right? You know. So this guy's starting to go through his records, and he goes, "Nope, don't have a Jim Furlong here." Now, you can imagine the color leaving my parents' face when they hear that, okay? So the next question, obviously, is, was Jim Furlong ever there? Nope, Jim Furlong was never here, okay? Because the telegram said he's going to this hospital, you know, on the Japanese islands. So my parents think I'm dead. Now, it's Sunday afternoon. My dad calls our congressman, who's got somebody on duty to handle constituent issues, even on a Sunday. So he hears the emotion in my dad's voice, and he thinks this is important enough that he's going to call the congressman, who immediately gets on the phone. By the way, our congressman at that time was Morgan Murphy. He was the chairman of the House Affairs Subcommittee for Southeast Asia. Okay, a guy you don't want angry at you if you're in the Pentagon. So he immediately calls the duty officer at the Pentagon and says, "Find James Furlong immediately." Okay. Now, don't forget time zone differences. It's middle of the night in the Philippines, and I'm laying there, and they roll in this contraption that had a phone on it, but it was a fairly big device, and they plug it into the wall, pick up the phone, and she says, "Here, your mom and dad are on the phone. Talk to them." So they found me, all right, probably in record time. So I'm talking to my dad, and I said, well, now I'm being told that I'm going to go right from here to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, where I'm going to recuperate. And as an afterthought, I said to my dad, gee, Great Lakes has a big naval hospital in the Chicago area. Why can't I go to Great Lakes? So I'm thinking that out loud, and my dad and I pick up on that. And he goes, the congressman gave me his number, said if I had any problems, give him a call. So the next day, or when he gets off the phone, my dad calls Morgan Murphy, and he says, Congressman, my son is being told he's being sent to Denver, and we're kind of curious why he can't go to Great Lakes. Morgan Murphy says to my dad, don't miss Furlong, I'm going to find out. And so he calls my dad back about 10 minutes later, and he says to my dad, Fitzsimmons Army Hospital has a specialty of handling amputees, lower leg amputees. It's probably the best place for your son. But if you want your son at Great Lakes, that's where he'll go. So my dad calls me back, and we're talking about it. And he says, if you want, you can come to Great Lakes, But they explained to me about the amputees, okay? And I'm still at Clark Air Force Base, by the way. And so we decided that I was going to stay with going to Denver, Colorado, okay? So I got to Denver, Colorado on Super Bowl III Sunday, and you may be too young to remember, but that was the day that Joe Namath predicted that the Jets were going to beat the Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. And I thought to myself, even in an NFC city like Chicago, no way. So anyway, I'm getting off the plane. I said, who won the Super Bowl? And one of the litter bearers said, the Colts, or the Jets did. And I went, how did they beat the Colts? With Johnny Unitas and stuff like that. So that's how I remember the day I ended up at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, was the day that the Colts won the Super Bowl. Well, I was there until late August, okay? Most of the time I was pretty healthy and could come and go as I wanted because they were putting me through medical boards to medically discharge me for the Army. And you can imagine a medical board, how nice and comfortable and how long it takes to do everything. So I'm there 8 months. I want to tell you something right now. My mother was deathly afraid of flying, okay? And yet, for every weekend, for 8 months, my mother got on a plane, despite all her fears, to come see her son. So, they made about 34 trips to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver. So I liked Denver so much when I was there. As I started to get better, like I think I told you, they started to put me with a prosthesis, and so I'm able to move around. I bought a car while I was out there. And, we just started moving around and looking at Denver. And when I say we, there were other guys in the hospital that would go with me. And we'd drive around. And besides looking for good-looking young women, well, the town impressed me. So when I got back, the VA told me that I could go to any, I wasn't eligible. I was eligible for the GI Bill, but they had something better called vocational rehab. And now they're going to send me up to a master's degree to go to school. So I start looking around for schools, and I thought, that Denver was kind of a nice town. So I applied to the University of Denver, and lo and behold, they had alumni here in the Chicago area who started calling me up and telling me what a great school DU was. I was a Blackhawks fan at the time. We had Keith Magnuson and Cliff Corral from the University of Denver playing for us. And so I applied and got accepted, and I went back and spent 3.5 years roughly at the University of Denver, where I eventually received my master's degree in economics.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Then, I like Denver so much, they come and have what do they call them at the university? A session where different companies can come in and interview prospective graduates. So I'm interviewing with the United States General Accounting Office. That's what they were called then. Today they're the Government Accountability Office. And I really like what I'm hearing. I'm young, I'm single, and I hear there's travel all over the Rocky Mountain region from border to border, from Montana down to New Mexico. So I thought, this sounds like a pretty good deal, okay? And so I signed up for GAO, and we were constantly getting jobs like at Cheyenne Mountain, which is NORAD, which is a highly classified area, and then down at the Department of Energy labs in New Mexico, like Los Alamos and Sandia. And so I get a top secret clearance with the kicker SCI, Special Compartmentalized Information, which is the highest, basically about the highest classification you can get. So anyway, about 5 years later, 3 years later, I decided to get married. I meet this gal, and now I don't want to travel so much. So I start looking in the paper, and there's this computer company that would like to hire me. And they went nuts when they heard I had a security clearances, okay? Because that's something they would do to people that would work in this area. So I go to work with my security clearances. Every 6 months, I've got to have a lie detector test to make sure I'm not siphoning money out into and they got to look at my checking account all the time, too. But it was part of the requirement to keep the clearance, and I needed the clearance. I wanted a job. And so I ended up, getting a job with, at the time, was called Digital Equipment Corporation. At the time, they were the second largest computer company in the world, but they kind of thought there was no future in personal computers, which was not the best policy to have back in the 80s. So anyway, I've got that job. And then they put me as a sales manager in charge of groups that were selling into the government from all over. So, in other words, I had a 4-state territory: Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. And some of my people didn't have the clearance that I had. So if there would be a project that I needed to work on at Johnson Space Center, for instance, that was classified, okay, then I would be briefed into the program, go do my work, make my sale pitch, do a best offer, a bid on a particular project, and then I would get debriefed out of it afterwards, where, in other words, what did you learn? And I would tell them, and they would go, okay, you don't talk about that, you don't talk about that. So, like our company, subcontracted with Sandia Labs in Albuquerque to outfit the 747, because back then they were still using the old 707 as Air Force One, and the 747 was parked at Kirtland Air Force Base, which is joint facility with the municipality of Albuquerque. And every time I'd fly into Albuquerque, I would see the 747 sitting there. we were subcontracting with them to do the network on the 747. Now, that was highly classified at the time. I'm sure that the network on the Air Force One's been upgraded many, many times since then, since that was the 80s, somewhere in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty extremely high-tech now. But, hey, Jim, we're going to take another break here. Word from our sponsors. When we come back, we'll pick up where we left off.
You got it.
Put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, right on down the line. Come on over. Come on over. What's that over?
My father was the best truck driver I've ever known in my life. Like a family tradition.
I'm a truck driver myself. I drove around the state with my cat.
To be the truck driver, you not just only see where you go, you see the world in the larger perspective.
This is a really good time to be in the trucking industry. The dispatchers get good loads for them. The equipment is very new, and then it's very reliable.
At GTS Transportation, we make dreams come true by employing truck drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and many other occupations. Consider joining our rapidly expanding team where we put quality, human dignity, and respect back into the workforce. Contact us by visiting our website at gtscarrier.com or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
Attention, all U.S. veterans. You have served this country with honor and pride. So why is it so difficult to receive the benefits you deserve? Filing a VA claim is complicated, it's cumbersome, and time-consuming. Many veterans have a problem identifying what conditions they should apply for. VDAC, Veterans Disability Application Caddy, is an online application that greatly assists you with filling out your application and identifying the disabilities that you're entitled to. The VDAC process takes about 15 to 30 minutes. From start to finish. The entire process is simple and easy to use. The software automatically cross-references the VA database to determine what presumptive conditions you are entitled to, as well as any secondary conditions. Once done, a fully completed VA form is generated with supporting material. To find out more, go to nifv.org and click on the VDAC button. Again, the website is nifv.org and click on VDAC.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
Everybody, welcome back. I just quickly want to say this. I don't know if Jim's going to mention it because, as most soldiers are, is pretty humble. But in his actions that he talked about in Vietnam, he received the Distinguished Service Cross. And for you that don't know what the Distinguished Service Cross is, it's our nation's second highest award. And you only get, you get that for, you got to put your life ahead of somebody else's, basically. And, there's certain stipulations, but it's a very high award, very prestigious award. And I don't know, Jim, if you were going to mention it, but I just think it's important for people to understand that, we don't do what we do for awards by any means, but it is nice to get, that you were able to get that because you deserved it.
My good friend Doug Sterner, if he's on, he says the same thing about me. I don't see it. I think I told you earlier that, I like to talk in front of groups, whether they be veterans or schools or just the public in general sometimes. And I'm asked about it, but I try to focus on those guys who didn't come back, like Glenn McAdoo, the guy who died the day I got hurt. Okay? Glenn didn't come back. He'll always be 21 years old in my mind, and everything. So I try to get out to see his grave when I go out to visit. My son lives in Los Angeles, and everything. And we can't forget those people.
Absolutely not.
I'll tell you a story about the Vietnam Wall if you got a second. I used to,
sure.
On my job with Digital, the big computer company, I used to go into Washington quite a bit because I was the government, with the government unit. And I would get to Washington, and I would go to see the wall at night. Okay? It's very safe. You walk in from the West End, like at the Lincoln Memorial. You're maybe 50 feet from where you park your car, maybe 100. You walk down the gash, and it's quiet. It's reverential. It's almost like being in church. And if you see somebody in there, you know it's a vet. And you kind of give the nod, the acknowledgement, and things like that. And the wall is backlit from the ground up. And so you can still get to the panels. You get to see the names of the names. I know about 30 names on that panel. And I would stop in front of many of them, and sometimes I would break down thinking about that person who's still 21 years old. And so now I go to Washington one time when my son is a junior in high school, and he says, we go to the Vietnam Wall. And I promised myself that I'm not going to break down. But yet I still stopped in front of all the names that I wanted to look at. And I would explain to Patrick how I knew them, whether I went to high school with them, whether I trained with them, or whether I served with them in Vietnam. So we get there, and we start down the West End. We go down, and it kind of like drops down. So at the top of the wall, it's ground level all the time, okay? And then we start going up the East End. So you go back up after you go down to the middle. Mm-hmm. And I'm about 2 panels from the end, and I stop and I see a picture of a Polaroid picture sitting there. And I could tell it's 2 vets. And all of a sudden this little boy comes up. And with all the innocence that only an 8 or 10-year-old boy can have, he picks up the photo and kind of like says to me, "Do you know anyone whose name is on this wall?" Oh, that got to me. I lost it in front of my son. I've been doing so good. And the father was kind of shocked. And I said, "It's a child's curiosity. It doesn't bother me." Okay? It doesn't,
Right.
Yes, I do. I know many names on this wall.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So now I'm working. And by the way, when I went to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, when I was first checking into the hospital after the flight from the Air Force Base just outside Sacramento, Travis Air Force Base, I get to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, and of course they're taking your vital signs out in the lobby, And the major who's going to be my surgeon comes up to me, and he says, "How you doing?" I goes, I always wanted to come to Colorado because I wanted to ski. He goes, "Well, we'll get you skiing. Don't worry about it." Okay. And sure enough, in April, when there's still snow on the mountaintops, they took us to Arapahoe Basin. I promptly jumped without any training. I promptly jumped on a chairlift, go up to the top of A Basin, which is above the tree line in the Rocky Mountains, okay, and start skiing down, and I'm falling every 10 feet. It took me basically all day to get through. But I stayed with it, and I did learn how to ski. And then I thought to myself, I want to give back to what people gave me, the volunteers that came out and taught me how to ski. That stuck with me, okay, and taught me how to ski. So I decided I'm going to help the handicap ski program at Winter Park, but I'm working, so I can only come up on weekends. Well, Sunday is the day they brought blind skiers up. So starting in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I'm teaching blind kids how to ski. Okay, and it was
That's awesome.
Amazing. They would give me the problem people, but, I remember one time I had this gal who was 16, and I kind of heard her, she's blind, so she doesn't know that highlight is wooden, and so she's kind of sniffling, feeling sorry for herself. I said, "What's wrong, Patty?" And she goes, "You don't know what it's like to be handicapped." I've got my ski pole, right? I slapped the side of my leg about 4 times, and it makes a big, loud boom, this loud noise. Crack, 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 like a baseball bat, hitting a baseball bat. She said, What's that? I said, that's my ski pole hitting my artificial leg. I do know what it's like to be handicapped. Okay? Well, that got her over the hump, boy. We taught Patricia how to ski. She was a good skier. Okay? And I'm real proud of all the people that I worked with. I worked with one guy who was diabetic, lost his sight because of diabetes. And before that, he had been an NCAA top skier. So he could ski really good, and following him was a challenge for me with my equipment. And then I once had a little 5-year-old boy, and he'd fall down, and I just kind of ski up to him and reach over and grab him by, and his legs were all akimbo. I would reach down, pick him up by the scruff of his jacket, and as he came up, the legs would straighten out. I just set him back down on the ski trail, and we'd start off again. So I really enjoyed that. That was the way I started giving back to my community, okay? And my late wife and I, we were volunteers at Edward Hospital in Naperville, and we taught in the orthopedic ward, and I was the only guy that was allowed to wear shorts. Everyone else had to wear tan slacks, almost like a little uniform, but I could wear tan shorts. And of course, my leg is exposed, okay? Now, right. I was going in there and working with people who had just had their knees replaced and their hips replaced, and I'm going to be their coach for exercises. And as I walk up to them, they look down, see the leg, look up, and go, I'm not going to get any sympathy from you, am I? And I go, no, you're not. You're not getting any sympathy. And I work them, and everything like that. So, I wasn't mean, don't get me wrong, but,
Well, no, but in that situation, there's nobody better to, you can relate to a lot of it. I mean, and they can relate to you, and so you're not going to feel sorry for him. And to be honest with you, people that are hurt or so-called disabled, I don't like that word. I think I choose ability. I think it's everybody's ability will overcome disability every time. If you have the ability and you have the desire to do something, no matter what it is, you can do it. And so, but you can relate in a way that nobody else can, and they can relate to you. So it's much easier for you to teach them. So that's awesome that you did that. And I think a lot of service members, when they get out, they give back in their own way, and it's just something you do. I mean, you just want to take care of the people. And so I understand that you became an author, and you've authored some things.
An office?
Author. You've written.
An author. Yes. Let me mention that. This is a good time to plug my good friend Doug Sterner, who I sent a note that I was going to be on this. Doug, I hope you're listening. Doug Sterner is the editor of a book series called Beyond Belief, which tells stories sometimes by the branches, sometimes of the service branch. In other words, we've talked about Navy heroes that served in the war, and then the next book we did chaplains that did distinguish things, whether they were in the Navy, the Army, or the Air Force, okay? So Doug has this series of books called Beyond Belief. It's on Amazon, folks. If you like reading military books, my suggestion is go out and buy one. I contributed about a year and a half ago a year ago, because it was released on Memorial Day, to a book called Beyond Belief, True Stories of Naval Heroes. Now, somebody sent me, in fact, I know who it was, so I'm going to mention his name, too. My good friend Fred Wingfield, who was a Marine veteran, sent me a little published story about a black man, who had swam an incredible amount of time in the water off bottom during a war situation. I'm going to explain what happened. This gentleman's name was Charles Jackson French. Okay, he's a steward on board a troop ship. And back in World War II, black people, besides the Jim Crow era, black people were only, even in the Navy, allowed to serve as stewards or warehousemen for some menial task job. And I'm so glad we changed our attitude on that through the years. But anyway, French, the ship gets hit, and they're off Guadalcanal, okay, the famous World War II battle. and the ship is sinking, and there's an abandoned ship call goes out, and French, literally, he didn't jump in the water. He literally walked into the water off the deck of the ship. It was sinking like that. And he sees a life raft and climbs into it, and it's filled with about 24 other survivors. But it's got a lot of holes in it, and the sailors are stripping off their clothes to plug the holes, and it's supposed to have a motor, and the motor's all destroyed by the shrapnel from the sinking of the from the ship being hit. So it's drifting. It's on no power, and it's drifting towards land, Japanese-held territory. And they get close enough where suddenly a shore battery of machine guns opens up on them. This man gets up, strips off his clothes, ties a rope around his waist, jumps into shark-infested waters, and swims for over 6.5 hours until they're rescued the next day by an American ship. He got for his effort, which I think was an extraordinary act of heroism, he was given a letter of commendation from a famous World War II admiral. And that was all. He died of alcoholism at 38 years old. Okay. But,
wow, that's tragic.
And right in my section, just to give you a little idea, I have a good friend, Dr. John Arnold, who does research for me with a company called NICOM. NICOM.com is their website. And John Arnold can go into the archives and search for specific things. He's very good researcher, okay? So to do my story about the sinking of the boat and the sailor who made a hero, I rely on the after-action reports. John gets me the after-action reports, and so now I'm able to pinpoint, you're on that boat while it's sinking, and this seaman is here now, and this is what he was doing when the ship first started getting shelled, and this is what he was doing when the abandoned ship command comes over the loudspeaker system. So I thought I did a pretty good job of detailing, this seaman was here, this machinist mate was here, this guy was in the boiler room, and tell their story, of
right.
what they did when the ship was going down. So
is there not?
We do a lot of research. So again, if you're inclined, look on Amazon for Beyond Belief, true stories of, let's say, naval heroes. We're doing civilians who were in the war. And one of my subjects is a guy by the name of John Paul Van. I'm not going to spoil the book for you, so I'm just going to let you say it's a fascinating story of what he overcame. And he was the commanding general as a civilian, okay, in 1972 during the Battle of Khartoum. And so John Paul Van died the night of the victory when his helicopter crashed into a grove of trees, which just happened to be a local village cemetery. So fascinating, but the story up to that point is also very fascinating. And then the other guy I'm doing is Mo Berg. Mo Berg had been a catcher in the 20s and 30s for the Major League Baseball. He was a catcher. And when he retired in 1940, I think, just before the war started, he ended up becoming a spy later on in the war. And I'm going to tell you the story here in a second. So this is Mo Berg. He's a catcher, okay? Mo Berg, among the other assignments, he got a lot of tough assignments. He was also very smart. He spoke 12 languages and had a degree in languages from Princeton University and got his law degree from Columbia. He goes into the OSS, and everyone in the United States knows that, everyone in the command levels of the United States know we're developing a bomb. And they don't know how soon it'll be ready, and they're worried about the Germans developing the same bomb because a lot of our scientists are German, okay? So we know they're working on a bomb. So the head of the German program, Werner Heisenberg, is going to give a speech in Zurich, Switzerland, which is neutral Switzerland. Berg is sent there with a gun in his pocket and a cyanide capsule in his pocket and is told, if you think the Germans are close to developing the bomb, assassinate the man. Okay? I won't tell you what happened. You'll have to read it yourself. Anyway, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Hey, I have one question for you real quick about Mr. French. Is there not a way to go back to have that reviewed and have him get
I often wonder that. And I know you guys are advocates for veterans, and I think the man ought to be recognized. Okay? Clearly, any vet that's seen the story, veterans know what heroism is. He was a hero. He saved 24 lives that day. And he had the sharks nibbling at his toes. Yeah,
that's I would like to get with you offline here. I'll give you a call in the next couple of days, and let's see what we can do. I mean, there's no reason why they can't go back and review that and give him what he deserves.
Biden awarded a Medal of Honor to a 95-year-old soldier from World War II. Puckett was his name,
right.
Colonel. And,
right. I mean, they can always go back and review this.
So they went back and checked on him.
Yeah. So it's an extraordinary story, and I really want to read up on it even more now. I'm intrigued, and I definitely want to see if we can help his family. He definitely deserves more than that.
Much of his family. I don't think he had any children, and he was an alcoholic till the end of his life. Well, I'd be an alcoholic too. They were parading him around for a while as a bond salesman, but eventually they sent him. They were going to put him on a ship that was going to sail to Okinawa and be part of that invasion. Okay, and it's a troop transport, a lightly armed troop transport. Now, if I had been in a troop transport that had been sunk in a battle, and I was going to another battle on a troop transport, I'd drink too.
Right. That's a good point. But I definitely
and hospitalized. They had to dry him out.
Yeah, I definitely think he deserves a lot more than just a letter of commendation, and for whoever. I mean, it's the right thing to do.
100%.
All right. Well, I'll give you a call. I'll give you a call offline here in the next couple of days, and we'll get caught up on that and see what we can do. But that's all we have for tonight, Jim. I really appreciate you coming on. You are a hero, and I know that you're humble and you're going to disagree with me, but you are. And I really appreciate the service you've given to this country during Vietnam, after Vietnam, all the way up until now. I thank you so much for coming on the show, and thanks for sharing your story.
Hey, Doug, I'd like to say one more thing before I hang up here. I'm a proud parent. My son, Patrick, is going to receive his doctorate on Sunday, Mother's Day. So I'm going to fly to Los Angeles this weekend. So Matthew and Maya, my grandchildren, if you're listening, Grandpa can't wait to see you, okay? That's it, Doug.
Awesome. Congratulations. And we will talk to you in a couple of days. I really appreciate you coming on. And for everybody listening tonight, nothing. I'm just doing the closing. For everybody listening tonight, I really appreciate you tuning in. I know this runs a little bit longer than what we usually do, but this is a great story, and these stories need to be told. And hopefully it will start to shed some light that there's a common theme in my stories and my podcast, that everybody comes on, no matter how bad they were hurt, no matter what they went through, everybody always overcomes it, and then they want to give back. And this story tonight is no different. And again, in closing, please keep the Eli family in your prayers. They need it from all of us. They're going through a hard time right now, and I hope everybody has a great week, and we'll talk to you next Monday night. God
Patrick,
bless you.
Just one other note, Patrick. I am going to that service on Thursday. I'm trying to, okay? Maybe I'll see you there.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody, God bless you. God bless the United States of America. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggins.
My father was the best truck driver I've ever known in my life. like a family tradition.
I'm a truck driver myself. I drove around the state with my cat.
To be the truck driver, you not just only see where you go, you see the world in the larger perspective.
This is a really good time to be in the trucking industry. The dispatchers get good loads for them. The equipment is very new, and then it's very reliable.
At GTS Transportation, we make dreams come true by employing truck drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and many other occupations. Consider joining our rapidly expanding team where we put quality, human dignity, and respect back into the workforce. Contact us by visiting our website at gtscarrier.com or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
Attention, all U.S. veterans. You have served this country with honor and pride. So why is it so difficult to receive the benefits you deserve? Filing a VA claim is complicated, it's cumbersome, and time-consuming. Many veterans have a problem identifying what conditions they should apply for. VDAC, Veterans Disability Application Caddy, is an online application that greatly assists you with filling out your application and identifying the disabilities that you're entitled to. The VDAC process takes about 15 to 30 minutes from start to finish. The entire process is simple and easy to use. The software automatically cross-references the VA database to determine what presumptive conditions you are entitled to, as well as any secondary conditions. Once done, a fully completed VA form is generated with supporting material. To find out more, go to nifv.org and click on the VDAC button. Again, the website is nifv.org and click on VDAC. VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggin. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.